Okay, is everyone ready?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
뭐
then we'll go straight into it.
하나 냉동실.
Okay, so Hongyeon, you're studying today?
Yes.
With the reading.
이제 내가 시작하네.
Do I start now?
Yeah, go ahead.
빨리 나가. Proponents of euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide contend that terminally ill people should have the right to end their suffering with a quick, dignified, and compassionate death. They argue that the right to die is protected by the same constitutional safeguards that guarantee such rights as marriage, procreation, and the refusal or termination of life-saving medical treatment. Opponents of euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide contend that doctors have a moral responsibility to keep their patients alive as reflected by the Hippocratic Oath. They argue there may be a slippery slope from euthanasia to murder, and that legalizing euthanasia will unfairly target the poor and disabled and create incentives for insurance companies to terminate lives in order to save money.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Jihu.
Do I start now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Proponents of euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide contend that terminally ill people should have the right to end their suffering with a quick, dignified, and compassionate death. They argue that the right to die is protected by the same constitutional safeguards that guarantee such rights as marriage, procreation, and the refusal or termination of life-saving medical treatment. Opponents of euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide contend that the doctors have a moral responsibility to keep their patients alive, as reflected by the Hippocratic Oath. They argue that there may be a slippery slope from euthanasia to murder, and that legalizing euthanasia will unfairly target the poor and disabled and create incentives for insurance companies to terminate lives in order to save money.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jay, you ready?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
My opinions and why I agree in whether euthanasia should be legal is supported by two main reasons that relate to solutions and rights of relatives. To begin with, euthanasia can be a solution to incurable diseases. When one gets a disease that would most likely lead to death, like cancer or even a coma, then physician-assisted suicide would help a lot for the family and the patient too. Euthanasia is not even harmful enough that the patient can feel the pain. It is just a simple yet very helpful solution to people who do not have hope to live anymore. Furthermore, when euthanasia is conducted to a patient, then the family member would not have to worry about sudden deaths or hospitalization fees anymore. There are so many reasons and supportive facts that lead to the proposition of euthanasia legally. John Key, a New Zealand politician who served as the 38th Prime Minister of New Zealand and leader of the New Zealand National Party, quoted, "If I had terminal cancer, I had few weeks to live. I was in tremendous amount of pain. If they just effectively wanted to turn off the switch and legalize that by legalizing euthanasia, I'd want that." To further say the truth, I really agree on this quote. It just is the truth to speak of the advantage of euthanasia. Besides, ending the pain and life seems to be better than having to feel the pain to live longer. This is my first reason to agree on euthanasia. Next but not the least, I found out that my paternal grandfather passed away due to stomach cancer. However, he was the one who chose to receive euthanasia instead of having to endure diseasing pain and paying money on hopeless treatments. Not only because of this event, I understood that euthanasia is and should be accepted when the patient, or in cases of coma, family members should be the one to reject on the physician-assisted suicide. The medicals should not be the ones to decide. Family members and one has more right to decide whether the person will go through euthanasia. Doctors and the regulations do not at all have the slightest right to take control over one's life without having close relationships. This is my second and last reason to strongly present on my point of view. Thank you.
Okay, that was very nice. Thank you. All right. So next up is Yun Sung.
Okay, so I personally think that euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide should be legal. There are two important points and a story I want to use in this debate to argue that euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide should be illegal. At least 18 states across the country are considering whether to allow physician-assisted suicide, but legalizing physician-assisted suicide would be a grave mistake. My first point is that medical prognoses are often inaccurate, meaning people who have been told they will soon die sometimes live for many months or even years longer. They also argue that seriously ill people can often suffer from undiagnosed depression of other mental illnesses that can impair their ability to make an informed decision. My second point is that doctor-prescribed suicide is not needed. Under existing law, every patient and or his designated decision maker has the right to refuse prolonging life by artificial means. No one has to linger indefinitely when natural causes will lead to death. The most fundamental part of a doctor-patient relationship is trust. If doctor-prescribed suicide were legal, patients wouldn't know if the doctor's ultimate motive was to heal them or end their life. The doctor's duty is to kill the pain, not the patient. This is my story. Jenna Tao got an inoperable colon cancer. She immediately chose the suicide. However, her physician refused to let her take the drugs to end her life for a few weeks. As the physician found out that she had a son that was studying to become a police, he asked whether she wanted to see him graduate and marry. That changed her decision. She then strongly fought off the cancer. So, is suicide still needed? I personally think not. Thank you.
Okay. That's good. Move on to Hong Yun. Okay, you can go.
Most of the time, people are hospitalized in the hospital due to diseases like cancer, virus, or organ disabilities. The people in the hospital face many difficulties enduring their pain, and as it was so painful for the patients to endure, some of them would want to end their life faster due to the pain they had to endure until the end of their life. Euthanasia is also known as good death. The question, should euthanasia be allowed, was debated for a long time. Some people think that euthanasia should not be allowed, but I strongly believe that euthanasia should be allowed. Firstly, euthanasia will prevent the patient to live out his or her life in extreme pain. Patients may want to end their lives faster instead of living the rest of their lives in great pain, because if they stay alive, the disease will become more painful and the patient would not be able to endure them, as they will become weaker as time goes. To prevent further pain for the patient to endure, I believe that euthanasia is the best choice for it. Secondly, patients have the right to end their lives. They can choose if they want to live longer or if they want to die right now. It will just make the patient stressful if others stop them from ending their lives sooner. As a human who has the ability and the right to choose whether they can die or does not depend on others, but depends on the person making the decision. Lastly, euthanasia prevents the family having tremendous burden. This is especially for patients on life support machines. The burdens could be emotional or financial burdens. The guardian of the patient will have no more burdens emotionally, as they don't need to worry about their health after the patients pass away, even if the death of the patient is a great pain. Also, the guardian will have no more financial burden, as they will not have to pay every time for the patient to live if they are on a life support machine or have another surgery. These burdens will not be present when the patients pass away. In conclusion, I believe that euthanasia should be allowed, as the patient have the right, and there will be no more burdens and the pain will end faster. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Good use of your time. And next up, back to Jihu.
Do I start now?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I strongly believe that euthanasia should not be allowed. I have three main reasons to argue with. Firstly, I think that euthanasia is a murder. Euthanasia, which comes from the Greek word euthanatos, means good death, is the conscious act of ending a life by withholding necessary treatment or performing a procedure that directly and quickly causes death. Murder is the act of intentionally taking the life of one person. As euthanasia is inserting the medicine to the patient's body, it is definitely putting it on purpose. Next, euthanasia may empower doctors. Since many doctors now regard their profession as an occupation and not a passion, doctors may seize the opportunity. Many people are unaware that many doctors nowadays take unnecessary shortcuts so that they could have an undisturbed weekend. For example, a doctor pressured their patients to undergo a surgery right away so that they could finish it in order to get rid of patients' visits. Euthanasia will allow more of these to happen, as it is the simplest way to get rid of their patients. Just insert the drug and done. An example of this is Dr. Jack Kevorkian, who took advantage of his patients' agony and murdered them. According to his reports, he was trying to harvest organs for transplantation and to experiment ill people. He also claimed that he had helped 130 ailing people and their lives. However, he made a machine that allowed sick people dispense a lethal dose of medication to themselves by pressing a button. In Netherlands also, where euthanasia is legal, thousands of people are killed each year without request or consent. Dr. Peter Saunders, a general surgeon, has written that voluntary euthanasia makes the doctor most dangerous person in the state. Moreover, euthanasia undermines medical researches. People that support euthanasia should realize that if there are no researchers, there will be no cure to sicknesses. These researches results from continuous and thorough observations of medical researchers. However, with the presence of euthanasia, there will be less chance for the researchers to observe. Lastly, I would touch the emotional part of legalizing euthanasia. Using euthanasia to patients deliver a message that life is worth not living. Accepting what life has brought to us, as well as fighting to the end and waiting for death to come naturally, is the true dignity of death. Convincing people to kill themselves is like saying that it is better to be dead than to live, despite the long way they have worked for better condition. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Used up all the time. All right. We will continue. JE, your
Yes.
conclusion?
To conclude, euthanasia should not be hesitated to be conducted when the patient and family members agree on it, except for when the patient is in a state of coma and has no relatives and family members to depend on. Medicals and governors should make the law as in euthanasia legal, as one should not have to endure pain and sorrow just because ending his or her life by the medicals is counted as illegal. I do believe that when a person is encountered with such unbearable pain, the body might still exist, but the soul would feel as if passed away. When faced to choose right and regulations, we must not, at all means, confuse over choosing regulations, but instead feel proud to be right and choose to accept physician-assisted suicide. Thank you.
Okay. And finally, Yun-sung, your conclusion.
To round off everything, euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide should be illegal because it is not worth it, and every human being has the strength to fight off any sickness they have. It is just that they have to make the decision to trust their physicians and believe that they can cure their patient's sickness. Thank you.
Okay. So. Okay, let me just look at the. So, who wants feedback first?
Me.
Jihu? Okay, let's do it. All right. So, your reading was really good. You used more tone in your voice. I could tell that a lot, and you really tried to focus on your pronunciation. That comes through a lot, and you read it in a good time. It wasn't too fast or too slow, I don't think. Following on your debate, I think, is to date the best debate you have done. I can see that there's a lot of improvements been made. Although you did stumble a bit on your words, and I think if you just practice that speech that you had in front of you a couple more times, that would help with that stumbling. But it could also be nerves, so don't worry too much about it. But practice will always make it easier to flow from each word. No problem. I really liked your use of how when you stated the argument, you then took an example and then to back up the argument. That's always going to be good if you trying to put forth something for someone to think about and trying to convince someone. And I don't think you knew, but you did counter argument something that Hong Yun said about the good death, how it's a good death. And I think Hong Yun mentioned it in hers just before that. And you gave the other side of that, what that means, which was quite good to hear, especially one after the other. So, yeah, very good. Oh, and you were the only one that used up all the time, I think. I think you used up all the time. So yeah. Next, I'll go to Hong Yun because this is also a really good debate. This one's going to be a tough one to decide. But anyway, Hong Yun, your reading, we'll begin with that. Your pronunciation is really good. And I think you just need to work on some tone and some speed to when you're speaking. So you tend to keep it a similar speed the whole way through. Maybe sometimes you put a bit of emphasis on a word in the sentence and it just changes the speed. And it's kind of like driving a car. You don't always stay at one speed. You're going to keep changing depending on the environment and depending on the words that you see. That's just going to come with practice. More and more reading. Your debate. The start was really good. It explained where you stood in the argument and what your initial thoughts are.
Yeah.
And your debate was very well laid out with good arguments flowing from start to finish. And the closing statement was really good because you reiterated the pre-told examples that you already said, which is good. That means I know that you're coming to an end and you're closing off what you wanted to say. It was really good.
Thank you.
Yun-sung, are you half asleep today?
Excuse me?
Are you half asleep today?
No, so tired. I'm very tired today. I'm
Very tired today? That's okay. Your debate, I like that you stated your intro and what you were going to do with the debate. From there, I could tell you were going to have this amount of points, or this was what you were going to focus on. That's a good way to start your debate. You had a good amount of reasons and arguments. In the first argument, you talked about false diagnosis and how a doctor can give false diagnosis. Brilliant opportunity right there, because I noticed you were quite short on your timing. You could have just given an example of someone who has done a short diagnosis or a story that has happened, and you just explain that. It gets the reader or the listener just it's more convincing when you can add an example.
Okay.
Yeah, and the only negative I could really think was just the time. You could have used a bit more time up on that one. I think, but that's okay. If you were tired, I understand. And your conclusion was, yeah, you closed off the statement. Again, a little short, but that's okay. You didn't have much. You didn't talk about too much in your debate. So the length of the conclusion is gonna, you're gonna be the same sort of thing. Because if you maybe spoke about a story, you could refer back to the story in your conclusion or something like that. Bring the listener's attention back to your points you made.
Okay.
But really, it was okay. It was still okay.
Thank you.
And finally, Jiggy, your debate was very good. You had really good layout for your introduction, the beginning. So you've definitely got into this trend. I think in the last 3 sessions, I've noticed that you've started to begin in a similar way, and it's working. It's a good way to begin each debate. I also noticed that when you came across some difficult words that you had to say in a row, you self-correct yourself. Yeah, that's okay. You can't get it perfect every time. So you may have practiced and got it perfect each time, and then all of a sudden it can happen. But correcting yourself is good. You used good use of quote and using your own opinion on that quote. That's sort of like doing your own mini analysis on the quote, and just adding second opinions is always a good thing to when you're trying to make a statement. Did you mention that your family member had euthanasia?
Yes.
Is this true?
Yes, my dad just told me today, and I was like, "What?"
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, that's a great example. Sorry, obviously, but yeah, using that in your argument's that's gonna give you extra points. And I mean, as unfortunate as of an event it is, that means that you obviously
never
will
seen
have.
him.
You never saw him?
Yeah.
That's okay. It's probably
Both
a
of
great
my
guy.
grandfathers passed away.
That's okay. I mean, at least
Yeah.
he was strong enough that he could do that sort of stuff. So that's
I
great.
never feel anything about them, though.
That's okay. So finally, I'll talk about your conclusion. That one was a really good one. Much longer than what most people have been doing for their conclusions, because I don't think I've heard a conclusion from you before. So that one was quite good. You rounded it off with your previously mentioned points, as well as I think you were about to stumble on some words, and you actually slowed yourself down. And you just, because you could see yourself, you knew you were going to stumble. So you slowed yourself down, which stopped that inevitable event happening, and you could just speak and finish your points. It was good. So, overall, how do you guys think you did?
Very bad.
No comment.
No comment.
No comment.
Hongyun, how do you think you did? No comment. No, I want some comments. I want some comments.
It was fine.
It was fine.
It
In
was-
comparison to last week, what do you think? Do you remember last week?
Yes. I did terrible compared to that.
You think you did worse this time than last week?
Yes, definitely.
Last week. Let me see. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, overall, I think both teams did really well today. everyone had good points and bad points. But I think you guys are really making improvements over these last few weeks. Definitely. But I think the win is going to go
Affirmative.
affirmative. You are correct.
Ah,
Yunsung, what made you say that?
Like, I just know that I did very bad today. Like,
아니야, 그러지 마.
like
왜 그래?
I didn't think
Why?
like
you guys won.
우리가 이겼어, 제이야.
Sorry.
It's
Sorry.
you, it's you, it's you. Yeah.
Sorry.
I thought I messed up there. So, no, I mean, Yunsung, you obviously listened to them. So, did you think they had a better debate
Yeah.
than your team?
yeah. I even think that like I did worse than last week.
Yeah, I think obviously if you're tired, that will affect your
Yeah,
debate.
right.
So make sure you get some more sleep before next week. That's okay. Yeah, do you guys think this was an easier one or a harder one than the other ones?
Easier
Did you-
one.
Easier.
Easy one?
For me,
Yeah.
death penalty was easier.
The last one was easier.
Yeah, death penalty was easier.
I
아니,
think the
난
death,
왜 한 번도 못 이겨?
I seriously thought the death penalty was one of the hardest ones.
was
Yeah.
If I had to do it personally, if I had to do it, the death penalty was harder. This one was quite. When I read it, I thought it was going to be quite difficult, but you guys really showed up this time. This was good. I wonder what next week's going to be like. We'll find out. Okay. Do you guys have any questions?
Because yes, I have one.
Okay.
I have one.
Go ahead.
So, because our arrangements are like changed, so do we have to reset our wins and
It's
loses?
obvious.
I'm not sure. I'm not
Doesn't
sure how
it
that
even matter?
works. I think it should just register to your own person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Is-
I actually suggested switching up the teams. So,
No.
because there was some. I felt that you guys needed to change up a few things. You guys had to feel like you're not just working together necessarily, because you have to think about yourself. Each of you have your own individual thing that you have to explain.
Can I do the reading now, please?
You want to do the reading now,
Yeah.
like this second? You want to do the reading?
No, like
You wanna do the
instead of
reading
doing
next
Yeah.
If you would prefer to do some reading, I noticed you've been doing the conclusion every single week. So
Like, I'm getting bored of it.
we'll see. We'll just have to see. Okay.
Okay.
I don't have the final decision, so but I can give input. Okay.
Yeah.
So, any other questions?
Like, no, wait. I forgot what my question is. Okay, never mind.
Never mind. Okay, maybe you'll remember next week.
Yeah.
All right. If that's all, then you guys are dismissed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.